This was supposed to be done at Grand Lodge. We would get together all in the same room, have a chance to chat, interact, discuss the direction of lodge education in Minnesota, and solve all the problems of life, the universe, and everything. Barring that, we've got Zoom and a little bit of some things that I want to discuss with you. And I want to emphasize tonight, we're discussing with each other. This is not just me standing up and going blah, 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 because we are all here because we have an interest in lodge education, and Masonic education and research and all those other fun things. And again, I want to thank you all for being here. I'm going to work on throwing up on my screen just some slides in there. There is guidance, mainly to help us cover some of the things I would like to talk with you about, not just to you, but with you. Let me see, that's not it. We'll see what happens here. I think, have you designated me to share?
Right now I have it so that any participant can share screen.
Okay, so
let's see. I'll go into, no, we don't want to click that one.
Technology, it's a wonderful thing. I'm sure at some point in the building of the great cathedrals, somebody came up with a new idea. And the first thing was, well, we've never done it that way. And then the next time is, how do we do that again? This is kind of where we are as we build the cathedral of education.
Is anyone else seeing a share screen opportunity pop up on the bottom of their toolbar of the program?
I can actually share the screen if for something if I wanted to. So
okay,
great. I got it too.
Okay.
I have a share screen here, but when I press on it, I get a list of a menu of things that are not what I want to share. But I'm going to throw up my PowerPoint and see if anybody sees that. And if not, then I'll just talk off the top of my head rather than the usual place I talk out of. Let me see, I'm going to put it up into, any chance you see it now? It should say Leo Roundtable.
No.
No, sir.
Well, we'll worry about that later. It's not that important, believe me. What I'll do is just arrange this to remind me as my notes of things that we want to chat about tonight. What we're doing now kind of consists of two things, what I call one-way learning and two-way learning. The one-way learning kind of comes from me to either all the Masons or to you as individual Leos via the Leo column in Minnesota Mason, the monthly lodge education bulletin. And if there's anybody here tonight who is not receiving the monthly lodge education bulletin, reach out to me by email. I'll put you on the MailChimp distribution. The last one until we've gone dark went out at the beginning of May. They come out right around the 1st of every month from September through May. And then like most lodges, I go dark with that until September. And the other thing is the monthly E-Mason column that comes out in across the state to everybody. Those are the ways that are kind of one-way directed to you. I get feedback, and I really would like as much feedback as you care to give, because the more I hear from you all, the better I can do my job. I do not consider that I have any sort of corner on the knowledge, teaching, education market at all. As I was remarking to another brother just yesterday, in the last 2 years, I've learned more about Masonry than I have imparted. It's one of the great things about this job. You're forced to become a teacher, and as that person wisely pointed out, teachers often learn much more deeply because they've got to impart that. And that certainly worked for me. The two-way learning is, for example, the Speakers Bureau and lodge visits and talks where either members of the Speakers Bureau or myself, I get to visit you in lodge and we get to have as much of a conversation as we do anything else. It's two-way. We go back and forth. Guest columns, when you all and other brothers come to me and say, hey, I wrote this. What do you think? I love putting that stuff out. It shares knowledge. It shares education. It is a great way both to help you express your ideas and get them in either digital or physical print. It also helps, I feel, get people comfortable with talking about Masonic education. The other two ways, what we're doing here tonight, the Zoom meetings. And I think that that's really a great thing that we've got going now. I'm very excited about it. Of course, I'm staring down the barrel of having content like everybody else, and any of you out there who have been content producers, you know what that's like. So that's kind of what we're doing now. And it's kind of what is done, I would think, in most of your lodges. If anybody would like to share any of the things going over what I've just discussed. Now is as good a time if you want to unmute and just, identify yourself so I can kind of be seeing you and say, what are you doing in one-way and two-way learning in your lodges?
This is Brian Smith from Rochester Lodge number 21.
Yeah, Brian.
Okay. Yeah, one of the things that we've been doing, in fact, even before this whole COVID-19 business, I've always wanted to have a untiled lodge where we bring in speakers that could be national or international from anywhere and bring them in virtually into our lodge and take us at a tour of the Alamo, where where lodge is held once per year, or take a tour of the Scottish Rite, locations, or just Masonic locations from around the world. I've never been able to make that happen, and I've tried, not let's say in a dedicated way, but I've tried. But what we have been able to do since COVID-19, people are more comfortable doing that, and we have held one international or national speaker that came to Rochester, came inside air quotes, came to Rochester number 21, Worship Brother Johnson, and he's got a podcast, he's got a book, and he's very articulate. And so we had a pub crawl with him, and so it's I'll find the link and I'll put it into the chat session here. But there's a whole group of nationally known speakers with Masonry, and often they're willing to come, again, air quotes, right? Come to your lodge via virtual session and run it just like with a Zoom meeting like this. And so that was very well received. I think we had over 30 people that attended that from Rochester Lodge number 21 and the surrounding area.
That's really creative. And Robert, that you were able to snag Robert Johnson was fantastic. Is anybody here unfamiliar with Robert Johnson out of Illinois? Midnight Freemason, a couple of other things. He's one of our new, younger, up-and-coming international, almost, Masonic educator. Terrific guy.
I would say I was very fortunate to sit in on Rochester's meeting that evening. But I wanted to mention too that I know that one of the Leos out of Mound Lodge, Worshipful Brother Vern Schwabe, has done some invited in the local police and the DNR, and has them in for dinner. And then they go in the meeting room. They kind of discuss some things. They ask them to leave. They tile and do business.
And that's one of the things I advocate for, of course, getting lodge education done at the beginning of the evening, because that way everybody is still fresh and they haven't fallen asleep. Not that anybody ever, especially in Harumph Corner, falls asleep in lodge when it's late, it's getting up towards 9 o'clock, and suddenly, Leo, you got anything? So yeah, I'm all for getting it out there while the mind is still receptive. But You know, I'll preach that all the time. Anybody else have anything that they are doing in their lodge to either do one-way or two-way education? Hearing no objections, we will proceed. That's what we're doing now. I guess my next is more of a general question. What could we be doing? One of the things that, and Hans Nies, I'm glad you're here tonight. Hans and I have had a couple of just some great conversations. I would like to find out and get from you all your feelings about possibly doing one or two LEO training sessions, maybe dividing it up between the north and south parts of the state. Possibly when we do a Masters and Wardens Saturday, possibly doing it standalone, possibly doing it live, or even possibly doing it Zoom, kind of LEO training where we talk some more about educating, things about the process, whole different things. You know, the idea being, we had talked about kind of a LEO Academy, but it might be a fun session, and it's always great. And I think learning does best in person, but we also have distances. And quite frankly, there's a large part of the year where you may schedule something, and we all know that Friday night that blizzard rolls in and nobody's going anywhere. Whereas Zoom might be a way to do that, although there is the issues of distractions and stuff like that. But it's a question, I'd like to hear from you all what you think about that kind of concept of some formal LEO training. If you remember, my predecessor, Mark Robbins, did a few LEO symposiums down in Bloomington. I went to, I think, 2 or 3 of them. Attendance wasn't great because of the distance you have to travel to get there on a Saturday morning. And as one of the nice things, on Saturday morning, you can at least, put on a clean bathrobe, sit down at your computer, and you're there. So, what do you guys think about a LEO training session or sessions as we develop them?
Mark, this is Rick Vance. Can you hear me?
Hey, Rick.
I don't have a camera on my monitor, so I'm sorry I don't have that, but I'm glad you can hear me. First of all, thank you for putting this on tonight. But the one thing that I think is be great, and I've sent some of the material that I have to you, which is if some way or another we could just sort of have a catalog of presentations that all of us have put together on various subjects, and we could kind of just go and peruse them. And then if we say, hey, that's kind of interesting, but I don't really know how to share your presentation with my group, that you call up, the LEO or whoever put it together, and they could, at least kind of walk you through it so you had the confidence to, present it to your lodge. And, like I said, I've got probably 20 pieces that I'd be more than happy that other people could see. And, if they want me to come, I try to come, but if I can't make it, they could, at least use all my visuals and so on.
Yeah, Rick, I think this sounds nice. That's an excellent idea. Terrence and I remind me, Terrence, it was about a year or 2 ago, we basically organized all the West Metro lodges in a kind of a training of the LEO, kind of a seminar. And what we did is we took each degree, we divided that into 3 parts. So first, we explained what the proficiency was all about, or not just kind of the cryptic words, but also the meaning behind it. Then we started explaining by each degree the ritual, and then thirdly, a set of presentations and content in around what else is relevant for that particular degree. So we did this for the Entered Apprentice, for the Fellow Craft, as well as the Master Mason. And how many people did we have in attendance, Terrence? I can't remember.
We had an average of 40 to 50 people we had a 5 weeks of seminars, because the material that we put on for our candidates when they go through is about 60 hours worth of material that over the 3 months that they go through, and we crammed it down into 15 hours, 3-hour sessions, 5 sessions, and a lot of the guys that are on here came, and it's really valuable information. We had past Grand Masters who went, I've been a Mason for 53 years and I've never heard half this stuff. And so Hans did a great job putting all this material together and presenting it. And people really seem to absorb it. People really seem to, wow, this is great. And our candidates, you'll find the same thing. Our candidates really find that this, giving them that base of information has strengthened their tie to the fraternity. And it's so important. I go to too many of my lodges as DR. I go to too many of my lodges where you're lucky if a guy's got a proficiency coach, let alone teaching him anything about what any of this means. So.
And to speak to the comment that Andrew made, this is kind of these presentations are put together in a two-way form, meaning that the content is taught in the form of a Q&A. Right, so you basically ask the question, you saw X, Y, and Z in the ritual. What do you think that means? So you facilitate the discussion and close each discussion then off with let's say the real content or the real interpretation, and then you move on. So it's not kind of a one-way, it's truly engaging the candidate in this particular process to make them think about all these pertinent aspects for each of the degrees, and through the discussion, and the group discussion, if you have multiple candidates, really you gain a profound understanding, and guys are really latching onto it. Now, go back to Rick's point, all that material is available and has been made available to all those participants in that particular seminar. And if we could get additional information or additional presentations, we can kind of I'm managing it now through a Google Drive or format, but we certainly can group that and index it such that everybody who wants to tap into this, obviously with the appropriate credentials, can tap into this and use it in their own lodge.
And I think, Hans, you go to a very excellent point there, and it reflects on what Rick said. When we changed over the Grand Lodge website, all of the decades of material that we had available that was fairly easy to mine off the website went on to Google Drive. And just because of the exigencies of trying to get everything else done, they wind up pretty much unlabeled on Google Drive. You have to go in, open each one, figure out what it's about. Whereas previously they were there with labels, names, go, oh, that looks interesting. Let me take a look at that. I might be able to use that. Before COVID hit, I had been talking with the IT committee about bringing in an intern over the summer, perhaps, to go through all of Grand Lodge's Google Drive and label them and make it easier for Leos to be able to, or anybody, to go in and get that material. And to piggyback it now, I think it's a great idea, Rick, like you brought up, and Hans, as you described, putting this material in an easy to find process. I think there's been multiple studies that most people will click 3 to 5 times before they give up looking for something. So you can bury it down just certain level in before they go, I'm going to go look for something else.
I think Rick is also right that, don't be afraid to have someone come in. If you're not comfortable with their material and it's great material, I all the time I'll go out and I'll be traveling to another lodge and I'll see or hear a Leo presentation that was just great. And I'll say, hey, will you come to my lodge and present this? Because it's wonderful. Or the other thing Hans and I were talking about is, and we've tried to do with some of the Metro West presentations, is at these Metro West meetings doing these kinds of presentations so that we get 26 lodges, we get 50 guys coming to each one of these meetings, and so you're getting more bang for your buck by tapping into more people by having these, well, what we call quarterly, because it happens 4 times a year, sessions.
That's an excellent point. And that's a great way to reach more people. So that's certainly, Rick, I've made a note about online catalog. And we need to discuss further. And then what we need to do is find a fresh, eager, young, new master mason with those skills to do it. We can reward him handsomely with corn, oil, wine. The other thing that I wanted to look at as what could we be doing, and I would take it also that you seems from what I'm hearing and perceiving here that doing some LEO training sessions might be a good idea, and we can add that to the list of maybe some projects we can start to build and put together. And it is looking for the opportunities to broaden the chance for what I call out of lodge learning, where we widen our audience outside of a stated communication. And I think that was already brought up, where you bring in national Masonic speakers, but open it up to the public. It gets people to see your lodge. It imparts some real Masonic education. And it gives you a chance to continue the wider reach. In a way, we're doing it now with Zoom, but of course it's Zoom within Grand Lodge and everybody here is a brother. So there's a chance possibly to do them like the 2 internationally available talks that I mentioned, the materials coming out of the Grand Lodge of California, which they advertise very widely, and the materials coming out of Quattro Coronati Lodge out of the UGLE. And actually I think their new master is actually based in Sweden. And they do those, their talks, of course, are all in European time, which means it's somewhere mid-morning here. But they're a great opportunity and they are open to a wide number of people, although I noticed that most of the people attending happen to be Masons, a large number of whom are UGLE, but also from other nations. And of course, since it's untiled, there are other things that go on. So just kind of kicking around some ideas. Do you guys have any thoughts on extending your LEO presentations to things outside of your lodge, or making it one of those things when the master is looking to put together his trestle board and we ought to have a public event? How about a public speaker and bring in somebody noted from the outside, or use your own abilities? I think most of you guys are pretty capable educators and can put together something or mine something for that we have available to be able to present in a public format.
We've really enjoyed at Nelson Lodge inviting brothers in from other lodges that love to give a presentation. They're packed with content and very valuable. You get Monty Miller to come in and talk about the stepping off, or you get a Terrence to come in and do a presentation on the Scottish Rite. It's very impactful. So there's a lot of opportunity for brothers to collaborate and kind of travel and share some of their Masonic teachings or learnings, discoveries.
I think to your point though, Andy, that we've done presentations that are more public, but there and again, it's usually non-Masonic. It's interesting material, and we kind of always told Leos that not every presentation within Lodge has to be Masonic based. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. If someone wants to do a Leo presentation on fishing, I guess, or something, we down at the Savage in Minnesota River Valley, they did a ghost hunters kind of thing. They had a guy come in and they did it right after dinner before Lodge, and he talked about different ghost things and that sort of thing. I actually did a dog presentation down there just before St. Patrick's Day for Native Dogs of Ireland, speaking about dogs and what their traditional uses were for and all this sort of thing. And that's nice to change it up, to innovate the Lodge by saying, here's something else. It's still learning. It's still knowledge. We're still seeking light. It's just not necessarily Masonic light. And that's okay too.
I think also
Go ahead.
I think also is it gives you an opportunity not only to have a guest speaker from outside in the community come in, but there's nothing that says that once the lodge opens up, you can't have a little educational nugget also later on that is Masonic. That way you can open it up beyond just masonry. So I've seen lodges have presentations on financial planning, death planning, cooking, all kinds of topics. And then a couple lodges afterward, during their actual lodge meeting, they have a 5-minute, just a little Masonic presentation on some topic, not much of a discussion, but just toss it out there for brothers to contemplate and think about later on.
Well, I think you made a point there. Go ahead.
Our lodge, at one point, we invited, I forget the author's name, Scott Wolter, I believe, on the Kensington Runestone. That was an open to the public, but it had a Masonic ties to it as well. So kind of combine the two there.
Well, I think that's one of the things that if you probably have caught the drift when you look at the things that I've written in the last couple of years. When you consider the staircase lecture and all that it entails and all of these subjects within that, almost any topic under the sun can be considered Masonic in one form or another. And that gives you incredible latitude to write about the things that interest you. Because you can always find a little nugget of Masonic analogy, like fishing. Because are we not, to use an ecclesiastic allusion, fishers of good men looking to make them better? So you can do just about anything with that. So, you never feel limited, unlike in some jurisdictions where all Masonic education has to be very narrowly considered Masonic. I consider everything in some form or another capable of having a Masonic connection. And that gives you, as Leos, incredible latitude to be able to do and present and keep people's attention. It doesn't have to be 45 minutes, nor does it have to be 4 minutes. It can be what you want for it.
Say, Andy, can I kind of touch on the elephant in the room for a second here?
Absolutely.
And I saw Terrence has left, so I'm not talking about him or her. So, but it's there he is. So what's the elephant in the room? It's actually the lodge receptiveness, the culture in the lodge that is agreeable to, receptible to, and open to education, right? And I think that while many lodges strive towards kind of incorporating education in their program, as you mentioned earlier, it's kind of towards the end of the evening, or it's in the form of a guest speaker whose topic might touch 10, 15, 20% of the attendees in the lodge, okay? So we have kind of transformed education to kind of a pendant thing that has to happen, but there's not really a firm commitment within the lodges to make that integral to the fabric of the lodge and of our proceedings. And education doesn't have to be world-class speakers on eloquent topics or the like. Education is really done in some very subliminal way, right? You and I talked about that. It has to move as first part of the new items. It has to be when everybody is still fresh. Education can be in the form of 5-minute kind of exposés that a member prepared. Education has to be interactive with the crowd, meaning with those that are attending in the lodge. And so it's really the receptiveness of the lodge officers and lodge attendees as to how serious are we taking education. And if this remains to be a kind of an aspect that's put on the shoulder of the Leo, to make it happen, it's an uphill battle, right? So
Yeah, it's the culture, like you say, it's the culture. It's not necessarily the receptiveness. It's how much of a priority are they making it? They need to make it more. Lodges need to make it more of a priority and say this is important, because if your officers are not saying, "Hey guys, this is important," everybody else goes, "It's not important."
and the reason I'm bringing this up is that when I work with candidates and longstanding members are walking into these sessions, each and everybody walks out of them and says, "I had no clue what that means, what that meant. I've been a Mason for 20 years without knowing the things that you just touched on, the staircase lecture or the like." And that's a shame on us. Meaning we call ourselves Masons. We are representing the core values of it. We incorporate those in our life, but in many cases we don't even know what they are. And so what I'm saying, it's not necessarily done by the conventional way of getting a big name presenter in, but really start small and start with a commitment of the officers and those that kind of steer and regulate the proceedings within the lodge.
Hans, I think you make a really good point there. And I think one of the things that we see, you all are here tonight because you like Masonic education. We have lodges, as every jurisdiction does, where lodge education has not been their emphasis. It's been many other things over the years. Some lodges, I will tell you that one lodge I reached out to the Leo there that was the listed Leo, had been the listed Leo for a number of years. I reached out to him and had a wonderful, warm, caring conversation with his widow. He had passed 3 years before, and that lodge hadn't even bothered to fill his chair. We cannot control other lodges, but we can certainly encourage an atmosphere of education within Minnesota Masonry. And you all are helping do that. Like you say, making it emphasis. I know in some lodges, the Leo is almost an honorary title to a distinguished brother who has given a lot to the lodge, and they still want to recognize him, and they make him Leo, and maybe he gets the short talk bulletin and excerpts from there, and maybe he doesn't. But by building a core, and I always feel it spreads out as more lodges recognize. One of the things that there are multiple studies now showing that younger, newer Masons, people newly coming in their 20s, 30s, and 40s, Masonic education is very important to them. And they get a taste of things like Hans's lectures, some of the stuff I've seen like at Buffalo and some of the other lodges. They eat that stuff up. We have a golden opportunity to reach, well, as we reach a younger generation of Masons, to also reach our contemporary peer brothers as well. And so that's an opportunity. And that kind of brings me around to my last point.
Can I make one comment to that, Andy?
Go ahead,
There's our worship brother John Freeberg. I think I just saw him popping up in the conference too. Shared a book with me. It's called 41 Million Man, and this is specifically in around how do we address the younger generation? How can we appeal to them, and how do we need to kind of adjust our kind of a stance towards new members, and what do we have to offer as a lodge to attract these 41 million men into Masonry in the face of a progressive decline of membership at large. I really would recommend everybody are kind of taking a glance at that book. It's a phenomenal kind of overview of what this generation represents, what they're looking for, and how a lodge can transform themselves to appeal to that generation.
Yes. I guess finally, because I see that we're already 40 minutes in, my biggest question of the evening, and it's the same question I was going to ask at Grand Lodge when we met. What can I do for you all? You know, you've seen what I've been doing. What more can I do to do my job better for all of you?
Andy, this is Rick Vance. Can you hear me?
Absolutely.
I just want to say that when I was coming up as in the line, I'd gone to Anoka Lodge that I know Terrence and Hans and I believe John are all members. And I used Anoka as my benchmark for what I was trying to do at Corinthian Lodge 67 down at Farmington. I really didn't know what they were doing vis-a-vis their lodge education program. It was more about their meeting attendance, their committees, their organization, the strength of their ritual and so on. But after time, I feel that the best lodge education system in the state of Minnesota that I know of is at Anoka. And they have a Wednesday night candidate training, and Hans has put together what I call just an absolutely world-class, very, very insightful training that he's done. And there's others out there, I'm sure. I'm sorry if somebody else says that they're doing a really good job, but if the content and the structure and the work that Anoka could be better publicized so people knew that here's the best in the state in terms of how candidates are developed and how ongoing education's done, that I think everybody needs to know, what are we striving for? And from my perspective, Anoka's doing it better than I think anybody else.
One of the things we've been asked is to put on another set of seminars like we did last year, where we had, but it, like I said, it took 5 weeks to just do the minimal amount of information that we cover. And that's a lot of time for Hans. It's a lot of time for everybody to put in that time. They asked us to put one on for Metro East. And there, and again, we didn't have, where we put it on for Metro West, but we didn't say only Metro West guys could come. We had guys from outside of Metro West, not many, but some. And I think Sean came to one episode. I think you came. And so we'd love to put something on again, time prevailing, so that everyone could get a taste. And the hope was, when we did that, was for people to come, take this material, see it, because you can't just go, okay, here's the material, now go teach. So what we wanted to do is have people come, Hans present the information, show them what he does with it, and this way they could ask questions and this and that, and then they could go back, you know, teach them how to fish so they can go and fish for themselves and show other people how to fish. And we'd love to do that again, time and willingness prevailing, and interest. And we do that on a small scale with the other Metro West stuff that we do, teaching other things, how to do a Masonic service and all these other things, all these other educational things that we do at these other sessions. We'd love to do more with just that education for candidates. You know, I'm not speaking for Hans, but, you know, I know the willingness and interest is there. It's just a question of putting it together and finding the time. Time for everyone.
If we, I believe Mike Anderson and Larry Lyman have both have a couple of things they want to weigh in as well here, Andy.
Yeah, I'm noticing over here, we're trying to ascertain, and this makes me going to reach out to Mark. My predecessor, Mark Robbins, started the Leo Trophy, and it bounced around Southeast and Southwestern Minnesota. And I confess that I do not know immediately and instantly where it now resides. And I think we were all working on on presumption it was in Winona, but I see here, according to Larry, it's not in Winona.
No, we have two other trophies. We have a traveling trophy, a sword, that anyone cares to come and demonstrate proficiency in the sublime degree, we'll be happy to see if we can move that forward. And we also have a new trophy that Workswell brother Brad Phelps created recently, just this past year. And it was for attendance at meetings. And we earned that in Rochester several months ago. And we still retain those two trophies. Unfortunately, we do not have an LEO trophy, except as I would consider Jay Jensen, who is our LEO, to be a trophy.
Oh, he is. He is. And there's some question here whether or not it's actually in Owatonna. So I will try and find out and put out the word to send you all out there. You can see who races to Owatonna first. I think Mike reads, I'm going to read Mike Anderson's comment. I think it's a very good one, very on point. How many lodges have gone without a proper LEO program to the point they're not aware of what a proper LEO program is? Could there be someone to visit those lodges and give an example of one? And I absolutely agree wholeheartedly. The devil, of course, is how do we identify which lodges have an issue that a LEO visit of some sort would be in order from either myself or any of you who would want to? I would think perhaps, let me ask this of Terrence and Rick and stuff, would the DRs have a good sense of which one? And maybe it would be a question the next time the DRs are out and about, maybe in the early fall, because so many lodges are dark right now, to, what's the status of their LEO programs? Because I certainly would like to know. And certainly groups like this would like to know, because I know a lot of you guys are happy to share.
And there is a difference between so you can have lodges that have interesting LEO presentations, but no education. You have candidates that are falling to the wayside and leaving Masonry or just coming in blasé because there's no education. You could have a LEO that's doing some interesting stuff now and again in the lodge room, but there's no education. And that's a difference. And I would love to see some sort of hierarchy to say, this is what the LEO is supposed to do. There's so many lodges where a LEO just, stands up and talks once in a while. There are lodges where the LEO runs the education program, that he handles the candidates. He does this or that. And there's no real doctrine as to how this is supposed to work. I love your monthly bulletins. Those things are great. I've used a number of them. That's been fabulous. I appreciate that a lot. So thank you very much.
I thank you very much. It was the idea of our late Grand Master who brought me in. He kind of suggested, Andy, I used to put out something, weekly and all of that. And maybe every month or so, you might consider, and when the Grand Master says you might consider, and usually you will. And I started I'm glad you guys are I hope you guys are finding the monthly bulletin useful. At least it gives you another arrow in your quiver when you've suddenly got to do something. Or you look at what's available for the month and go, nothing here reaches me, but hey, this is a nice piece from the LEO Bulletin. So I enjoy doing it. It's one of those challenges of what am I going to do every month so I learn something new or find something to share with you all. And I'm glad you guys are enjoying it too.
Brother Andrew, I didn't put in any message. Could I insert just a couple of thoughts here?
Bruce.
Go ahead. Sorry. I'm having trouble with your audio. In terms of what a lodge does or what a master may help you to tailor. When I got started in the LEO area, I had no idea that I was going to make any difference in the lodge. All of a sudden, I'm not a great Leo. I'll admit it. But people were so hungry for Masonic education that they would come. And once I got going, other brothers volunteered and another brother would come in and say, hey, I know somebody, Monty Miller, who has something he can come over and present at our lodge. It just snowballed. And our membership being there at the stated meeting just jumped and has stayed there since. The men really wanted that. And because we are open on the degree of our candidate coming through, I mean, if we've got an EA in there, we're going to do the work from the EA degree. So I kind of have to watch it. We may not know what presentation I can give that night because I don't know what degree we're going to open on until we see who shows up, but it works. And we're very happy with our brothers and getting in and getting some outside help. And also I would love to hear if we have nearby lodges or one where we can go to and help their LEO program get reestablished, because it made such a difference in how the brothers felt about attending a stated meeting. They were all there waiting to hear that. And we keep it short. Not all lodges do. However, once you had the short ones, if you can call the master and say, oh, I've got presentation, but it's a little longer than the last one. You think it'll be okay? By that time, the skid has been greased. You get to do a longer presentation where it makes sense. So I'm back out at that, but that's what we have experienced in the past 5-6 years at Tussler Summit.
Bruce, that's a really great point. One of the things I often suggest to new LEOs is look at the history of your lodge, find if there was somebody who was locally distinguished back in the history of your lodge. See what you can put together about him. I wound up doing a kind of informal history of my home lodge, Ionic 186, when I looked up a man named George Levesque, who has several roads named after him and stuff like that around Duluth. And it wound up a great history of Duluth and Duluth Masonry. And I just kind of went down that rabbit hole. And it's always kind of a fun thing to do because it speaks immediately to the brothers of that lodge. And I think you make a really good point, on that. And also visiting other lodges, if you know that, boy, they could use some extra help, assistance, see if you're Leo and, do a visit and bring somebody along and approach the master and say, hey, our brother Leo has got a great presentation that you guys might find interesting. So I think you make a really, really sound point. What can I do for you guys that I'm not doing now? I mean, there's got to be something. You got to sit there and say, what's the Grand LEO? Why doesn't the Grand LEO do this or that?
Here for COVID, please.
Yeah, well, we're working on it.
I have one other thing that I don't know what other people in other lodge buildings have. We happened to get, about the time I was segueing into Leo, 2 new TVs on the walls, 2 projection screens on the one wall of our lodge room, and we use an old Epson projector because we have a large blank spot on the opposite wall. So our brothers can stay right in their seats. You can add a lot of pictures to what you're talking about. Just talking about something and trying to look at one small thing, say, that was up front on an easel or maybe projected on a smaller screen, doesn't always work or help you with your presentation. But having 2 TVs looking one way, I think most of the brothers sit on the south, the 2 TVs are on the north, and the other brothers can see a pretty good sized projection on the south wall. And it has made a lot of difference in how I'm able to better cover a subject when I am the one doing the Leo projection. Also, we can plug in other brothers who are coming in and use our AV equipment, so they don't necessarily have to haul theirs along and project it in one place. We get a little help there. It took a little work, a little money, but it made a big difference in our Leo presentations, at least from the way I felt about them. It gave me a lot more confidence in what I could do in a short session. Go ahead.
I think more education for the educators, like Hans has talked about, and like you came out and you did a presentation for Metro West on how to do Leo presentations, and that was wonderful. We had a lot of Leos there who learned a lot from you, Andy, that day on the things that you can present. I think like with doing degree work, I think it's sometimes important to show people how to present material, because you can't be the guy that stands up there, holds a piece of paper and just reads it. And a cable tow is you're going to lose your audience. And it might help some guys to get a better understanding on how to present material. What's a good way to present material? What's the time length you should keep doing? This is some of the stuff you covered when you came out, but this would be good to do maybe in a general thing, maybe have a session where we have, this stuff presented to people, and do a day when we're outside of this COVID where we can get together and you can physically show some of the things that you can do and talk about those things that you can do as a Leo.
That's a great point. Yeah, and that reminds me that something that I'm going to have to work on, and you guys brought up tonight, I have opportunities, and you all have opportunities. I think I figured it out, 36 essays come from the Grand LEO every year, including the summary report in the Grand Lodge report. Every one of you, I invite every one of you to contribute. It doesn't have to be from me. It can be from you. After which it's published. Of course, you get the world famous Minnesota Masonic Writers Guild pin, because Masons have so few pins. But I would love to invite you all to consider contributing. Granted, there's a certain enlightened self-interest there. That's one less I have to write. But on the other hand, it gives you guys a chance to share a lot of your thoughts. And I'm hearing some really great thoughts here tonight. But it's also inspired me to look over the next few opportunities to discuss educating the educators. Bruce, you brought up using the screens and stuff. I think one of the things that we need to consider doing when we do sessions for Leos is some of the fundamentals. A lot of you guys are professional educators, and a lot of you guys have been, like me, doing it as part of another part of your profession. And a lot of us, this is the first and only time you are doing education. And it might behoove us all to review, renew, and refresh, as well as introduce some of the basic thoughts and ideas of communicating the material. It's not so much, it's as much how we impart our knowledge as the knowledge we impart. So you guys have inspired me for some writing topics here. I didn't call this meeting just to mine your guys' ideas so I can write about them, but thanks. I do appreciate it.
Hey, Andy, you asked what you can do for us, or at least from my kind of point of view. Obviously, I touched on earlier, is that a lodge needs to be receptive to and should have a culture where education is appreciated and valued for the attributes it can bring to the brothers. And I think I shared this already with you, it starts from the top, right? It is really at a Grand Lodge level, there needs to be a commitment that education is a central theme of being a Mason. It should be a central theme in every lodge, without exception. And if we rest that burden on the individual master or an individual lodge, we might fail. So my request, or my kind of a help that I would really like to see you participate in, is instill that fierce desire at a Grand Lodge level about the significance of education in all lodges. It has to come from the top. It really has to come from the top. And only then the individual lodges within the jurisdiction will gradually transition and will adopt that philosophy. And I think amongst us, I think you're one that is kind of a best represented to send that message loud and clear to the Grand Lodge.
And I know we have the Deputy Grand Master with us tonight. So I know he's hearing this message. And certainly it's something, we meet every other month. So we have a meeting coming up in July. We've already had our May meeting. but I can certainly communicate to the Grand Master, because I know he also has all the things he writes and communicates. And I think I, certainly am not shy about saying, hey, boss, maybe you can address one of your things about the importance of Masonic education. And I think he would be happy to. That's a great point, Hans. Well, I see we have now expended an hour of our 30-minute allotment. And I know a lot of you guys have got some stuff to do. Anybody have got other thoughts, ideas, or as one of my old professors used to say, questions, comments, denunciations?
I must leave. I'm a half hour late to my own lodge's this session, which was started at 7:30. So I must bid you adieu. Thank you so much. I stayed extra. This was very worthwhile, and good luck on promoting it. Maybe every session for incoming masters at Grand Lodge can emphasize that educational aspect if they do not yet have it at their meetings.
I agree.
Well, thanks, fellas. Bye.
I'm gonna go ahead and launch the poll, brothers. So please fill that out before you check out.
Okay.
Thanks
It popped up.
Bruce, brother Bruce.
I appreciate everybody. Nobody has anything else. I think we're done, at least
Thank
for
you very
now.
much.
For the communication, you guys can always reach out, always find me. I'm happy to listen and discuss educational topics at any time.
Excellent. Round of applause for
All right.
everyone. Thank you much.
Good job.
Yes, thank you very much, sir.
Have a good evening, guys.
Good
Take care.
evening. Have a great evening. So I'm going to go ahead and go
Cheers.
into the closing share screen here, and at that point, we'll leave this open if anybody else wants to communicate beyond. So.
I got twisted up between my phone and the laptop because I was on 2 meetings, so I'm gonna follow my Leo and head back to my lodge Zoom.
Good deal. So here's the upcoming events for any of the brothers that are left. Again, you can find those on the Grand Lodge webpage. And just great thank you. Thank you all for submitting the poll. And Right Worshipful Brother Rolf, from Mike can tell, you are the highest ranking officer. If you have anything to share with the craft. You're muted, brother.
I think he is. Well, I think everybody might be. No?
I think his mic's not working.
You're unmuted now, Rolf. No audio, sadly.
Let's see what, I don't have him locked out or anything.
But you seem to go in and out from muted and unmuted, Rolf. I'm not sure why.
The pull down menu on the mic button, maybe you have to switch which mic you're using because it may be defaulting to something else.
Oh, well. Oh, I think he's waving goodbye.
Yeah, have a good night, Right Worshipful Brother. Thanks for attending.
Thank you, Andrew.
I'll go ahead and leave this open if anybody has further commentary or things to share here for a bit. I do need to step out, but feel free to carry on. I'm not leaving. I'll just be back in a minute.
Yeah, one last thing, Andy, thanks for really putting this up. It's obviously a topic that is near and dear to every Leo and probably Masonry at large, certainly in the context of our declining membership, and in the face of a new generation of Mason that is considering joining. And I think it's Frank, again, I reiterate that book called 41 Million Man, and very insightful kind of a compilation of what the craft will face in the years to come, and what population and what kind of the new members are looking for. You touched on it. The new generation that's walking into the lodge is looking for education, is looking for content with depth and width. And if we want to prepare ourselves for this, we need to start now. And so as such, I really would encourage everybody to kind of read this book. It has tons of very helpful and practical information that will help transition the lodge and become prepared for the generation that will join us in the years to come.
Andy, you asked about what a lodge can, what you can help the lodges with. And I think the one topic that seemed to catch a lot of people's interest based on their facial expressions was the program out of Anoka. Not so much just Anoka's program, but the idea of a structured educational program that ties in with the leadership, with mentoring, and all the other different committees that are out there, but deals really with educating the new member and getting them on a good path to start with. We really don't, I've seen a lot of stuff over the years, and after having just cleared out the Red Wing closet, found a lot of the old books from decades ago that it seemed like there was a program at a point in time, but it's went by the wayside. And I think it's one of those things that really needs to be brought back. And I think it falls the best under the LEO section rather than any of the other committees, because you're dealing with educating the new brother on masonry and starting at a basic level so that they understand a lot of the basics, which I don't think a lot of the new members are getting right off the bat, and might be something that if we can do a good job of getting that out there, we may have a higher retention rate because they're getting what they're looking for right off the bat versus joining a lodge, doing the degrees, doing their proficiencies, and then the little bit of information that's out there, having lodges piecemeal it versus something that's really in depth.
Well, I think you've got a great, I think one of the things that I think is that the mentor and the LEO should be like this. The mentorship have got to be just joined at the hip, because Masonic education starts and that first mentoring session after entered apprentice. And that's when they start learning and getting this, and they suddenly realize that they are now being exposed to a massive amount of information, a massive amount of knowledge and learning and topics many of them didn't even know existed. And suddenly,
from a personal standpoint, I've been sitting in on some Zoom meetings for the Scottish Rite. I have never felt so lacking in knowledge in my life than when I sit in through the St. Louis Valley down in Missouri. They're talking about stuff I'd never heard of or even experienced with the degrees, because they've gone back decades to previous ways of doing the degree work for Scottish Rite. And they're all having these great conversations, and here I am lost, where if I had a basis, I might be better enabled. And I think the same thing's true within Blue Lodge.
Can I Shannon, can I share my screen?
Yes, you should have that ability, Hans.
Okay, let's see here.
brothers, I regret I do have to go, but I will let you all enjoy. There's Hans's incredible stuff.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can you see this?
You guys should be.
Yes, it does.
Oh,
appear.
that screen looks familiar.
Yeah.
Thanks again.
So, Sean, you asked how we do this. So basically, each degree is broken down in 4 sections. And so particularly when we start with the EA, we started with what are the rules in the lodge, what are the functions, what are the officers. We then subsequently give a little bit of history, but really do it in the form of a story. So not just kind of a dry facts, but build a story around that. And we have a couple of members in the lodge that have dug into the history. So really it becomes flavor. Then the second time we meet with them, we go through the proficiency and we take each line by line by line, and explain what they mean. Okay. So, but also the what is behind it. And more importantly, how each line and how each section in the proficiency pertains to you in your daily life, right? So we make this really contemporary. We're not talking about God knows what kind of